Welcome to Attributions. Today we're speaking with Anjal Prakash about the Indian elections in the context of climate change and public policy. Anjal is an Associate Professor and Research Director at the Bharti Institute of Public Policy at the Indian School of Business, whose work focuses on climate change, water, gender issues, and urban resilience in South Asia. Anjal's also worked across several areas that included issues related to Himalayan water and resilience, snowpack and glacier-dependent river basins, and he's also been actively involved with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, as the coordinating lead author for the special report on the Ocean and Cryosphere in a Changing Climate. Today we talk about topics including how India is faring with climate change impacts in 2024, water issues in the Himalayas, the current Indian elections and the political chatter on climate change by major parties, why adaptation to climate change impacts will be important for India, and if political parties are taking into account gender issues related to climate change. It was great to have Anjal on the show, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. All right, so we are here with Anjal Prakash. Anjal, thank you so much for coming on Attributions. It's great to get you on the show.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for having me over the podcast. And I see that you're doing interesting work, and I look forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. So before we get started, Anjal, I'm just wondering if you can give listeners a bit of a background on who you are and maybe your career history and anything else that you think is important.
So I'm Anjal Prakash. I'm the Clinical Associate Professor, Research and Research Director at Bharti Institute of Public Policy at the Indian School of Business. It's one of the Asia's finest business schools, and I focus on sustainability and climate change. I teach sustainability issues to the PGB program, the postgraduate program, which is the flagship program of ISB. I have about 2.5 decades of experience working in the sector, most profoundly in the NGO and the UN mission sectors, basically looking at climate change, adaptation, water management issues. I've been part of IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, from 2019 onwards. I was part of the special report on Ocean and Cryosphere, which was released in 2019, followed by the sixth assessment report of IPCC, which was released in 2022 and 2023. I've been very extensively involved in these processes. My work actually focuses on issues of gender equity and climate disparities, and global north-south issues of climate change and climate equity in particular. And I focus on South Asia as a region.
Awesome. So Anjal, I did want to touch on so many of those things that you've just mentioned right now, in the context, of course, of the Indian election. But first, I just wanted to start, I think, by getting a quick update from you, at least from where you're standing and what you've seen and what you've looked at, of the climate change impacts in India this year. I mean, for example, I think it's been about 6 months since I talked to a climate scientist from India. This was last year, about 2023's extreme weather events that happened. And I'm just wondering if India this year has seen anything, similar to last year, given that obviously the summer period is still kind of ramping up in India now. So I'm just wondering what your observations have been this year compared to, say, last year.
Yeah, so last year, 2023 has been really devastating, especially for the Himalayan regions of India. The up north regions have received a huge rainfall and the flooding events that has happened, some of which was really devastating. Then starting the year, actually, there was a scanty snowfall in the Himalayan region again, which was also a cause of concern for many people who have been working for a long time in the region. And they have been maintaining that also the late arrival of what we call the snowfall has also been a cause of concern. Of late, most of the central India and the Indian peninsula is facing the heat stress, and you must have seen some of the examples. We had, and due to heat stress, we had a huge forest fire in Uttarakhand, which is the Himalayan region. So we have actually, if you look at the map of India, we are not safe from any side. You have this big Himalayan region, which is on the up north, which is faced by climate change disasters especially during monsoon and winter. When you have peninsular India, which is a coastal region, we have about 7,500 kilometers of coastline, which is prone to cyclones. And we have the scientists have been telling us that the cyclone, the frequency and the severity of cyclone has increased manyfold in last 10 years. And then you have this 54% of India is actually drought prone, which is also where heat stress strikes. So we are not safe from any side. I think India is one of the countries which is most climate prone, if I say, than what we compare with other regions of the world.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned the Himalayan region. I know you've got a particular interest in the mountain areas, as you mentioned in your brief bio. So I kind of had a follow-up question just in regards to that snowpack. At least the little amount of snow that the region got, was that basically because of warmer temperatures in your estimation?
Yeah. So the detailed scientific report is yet to come, but what we see prima facie is that the warming in the Himalayas has been really devastating. The recent ICMOD report also confirms this. ICMOD is the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, and they have been working and researching on the glaciers. There are 54,000 glaciers all across Himalayan region, starting from Afghanistan to Myanmar, and these glaciers have been at risk for a long time. The initial calculation was that about 2/3 of glaciers will melt, but what we know now, because of the advanced warming, and the elevation-dependent warming in the Himalayan region, it's being really devastating. So the glacier decline has been notably, problematic for people who are in the region, especially because it is rising. It is giving rise to what we call the sea level rise, because more and more water is going to flow downstream. Plus, it is also in terms of the what we call the life and livelihood of people are actually dependent. And it's one of the thickly more populated mountainous region of the world. Himalayas are one of the thickly populated mountain regions of the world, and that means that people who are directly dependent on some of these resources, especially when you have communities who are working on whose agriculture and livelihood is dependent on some of these critical resources, they are at risk. We also see that the devastating flood events which has occurred all across Himalayan region for the last 4-5 years has not been easy for people who are staying on those regions, and that has been devastating in my sense. So this year has been, the snowfall has delayed in 2024, and this has come to be noticed all across the Himalayan region. That has been because of the global warming and the impact of global warming on the ecosystem that we see, and this has been proven. So I think the discussion among the communities is not how much we can attribute to changing climate, but a lot is that we accepting that these climates are changing very soon, very fast, and it's impacting lives of the millions of the people there.
Yeah, I think it's really amazing to see. I mean, I was in the region in 2022, the last time I was in Himachal Pradesh, and I remember there was a huge downpour of rain that absolutely pummeled the roads, and I think some significant amount of people died during that time when I was there, and then also, I talked to some of my friends that live in the region now still, and this year, the winter that just passed, they were basically saying there was hardly any snow. So it's amazing to see that a very similar geographical space is getting huge amounts of rainfall at one period of the year, and then no snowfall during the colder periods of the year.
Yeah. So one problem that climate change has done is it's toppled the predictabilities of the season. So India had a very distinct seasonal outfit in terms of what are the 4 seasons of rainfall. Then you have this winter season, and you have the summer season, and in fact, if you look at the culture, some of the festivals were around those distinct changes in the climatic conditions. Like when you shift from, say, winter to a summer season, there is festivities around that. Those things that we see, those were marked in the calendar, but we see that the environment has not changed as much as the shift there. And that's very distinct for people that, they said, oh, this was a time for a bright sun and we see a rainfall. Uh, and that has been devastating. And what is it done to, because India is largely still about 60% of Indians are dependent on agriculture. And this is one sector which is hugely sensitive to any small change in the climatic conditions. And that is what we are seeing, that, the growth rate in agriculture, especially in large portion of agriculture, has been almost negative because of the, interplay of climatic conditions, socioeconomic situation of the people, and the lack of, what I would say, authorities to reach out to the people in terms of bringing solution on the ground. And this is all combination which is leading to a huge number of people being disbenefited by the change process.
Yeah, absolutely. It also ties into, it's interesting that you say that there's a lack of solutions for agriculture, but it also led to, for example, the government, putting that export ban on basmati rice. So it's kind of like it almost feels like a reactionary approach that the current government is taking in terms of that, rather than trying to be a bit more precautionary and a bit more proactive. Would you say that's a fair thing to say?
I have not, looked into data on ban on basmati rice, and basmati rice is a very specific region of India is which producing. So what I'm talking about, subsistence agriculture, which is about, for 2/3 or 2/4 of population, almost half the population, which follows subsistence agriculture, which actually grows for their daily needs, and it only suffices for 5 to 6 months of their grains, and the rest of the time they have to do something else. And I'm talking about those people who actually have been really, really disbenefited by things. And they are smallholder farmers, less than an hectare of land, a family of 5 or 6 dependent on those land, and then they getting devastating effect of climate change.
Yeah, so given that context, Anjal, now I wanted to kind of bring into the picture the election that's actually taking place right now in India. And I think, obviously, depending on who you ask, Modi's BJP government is currently projected to be the favourite to come out as the winner of this election. So I'm curious to know if there has been any talk about climate change's impacts from the current BJP government. I'm of the understanding that BJP has made many promises regarding other things like clean energy, for example, but I'm interested to know if there's been anything promised in terms of, for community groups that, like you said, subsistence farmers that are suffering quite significantly from this changes in weather patterns. And of course, this touches many other sectors that are important to India, for example, like construction and manufacturing, of course. So I'm just wondering if in your view, do you think that the current government has been taking these issues seriously?
So, I have written an op-ed and I'll share the link with you. I compared both Congress and BJP. These are two major political parties of India, and their manifesto. And I was actually surprised to see a huge section on sustainable development, which includes climate change and the mitigation as well as adaptation to climate change and environmental management. Both the parties actually have put in their manifesto, which is really surprising for me. I had been doing this analysis for a long time, but this is the first time in 5 years that I've seen that these two political parties have put it in the manifesto, which is laudable. Both of them actually are very similar in the nature that they have looked into how they will be solving the problem of climate change. And then I'm very hopeful whichever party comes to power, at least in their manifesto, and we can hold them to account if they don't work towards that. That's number one. Now, coming to your question on how far has this government, the present BJP government, has achieved or what are they doing in terms of climate change? I think India has taken a huge leap, since last 10 years, if I would say, especially in the mitigation sector. So about 75% of the GHG emission actually comes from mostly comes from, say, energy sector. The uses of energy the way in which the government has strategized. They have put in a huge what we call effort on sustainable sources of energy. The moving away from coal has been very distinct in all our LDCs, and especially the the reporting to the global COP, that we have been actually advanced our energy targets, right? Recently in this budget itself, we have seen that the household energy consumption also has been boosted by a policy. So there's what I see is that a very positive change which has happened, especially in terms of the curbing GHG emission and meeting India's target. We have advanced those targets already, and that has been laudable. Now, what is that we have not worked on is the adaptation part. I think the local level adaptation, where people, some sectors are lagging behind. Some, in the regional understanding, say, for example, coastal communities, Himalayan communities, you have people from, semi-arid regions. These are the people who have been disbenefited. And there we need a lot more concerted effort in adaptation. That is what I would suggest.
What would be your prescription for the current, say, either BJP or Congress, for example? What would be your prescription for them to take adaptation a bit more seriously? How would you suggest that they go forward with something like that?
I have been saying this, that when the two things that I would like to put forward. One is that the climate change is a global phenomenon, but it has a very localized impact, right? And now even impacts of climate change, if it rains here, 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers, it will not rain. So it is that localized impact that we see of climate change. That means we have to work on what we call the sub-district, not even district level planning, sub-district level planning, where we need to scan all the projects that we are having from the climate lens. And this includes welfare program, this includes the development projects that we are having, highways are coming up, anything else that we are having, we must scan through. The second part is about climate resilient infrastructure. We have been seeing that some of these coastal areas, for example, have been reeling under cyclones. And that means whatever we are building there must go through a very rigorous process through which we see that they can hold, for example, 200 kilometers of rain of wind which is flowing during the extreme, conditions or climatic conditions. Some of these things would require a lot more money that we actually assume. So that's the second. And for all this, what I'm suggesting and I've been putting forward is that we need the Ministry for Climate Change. Now, at this moment, the Ministry for Climate Change is attached to Ministry of Environment Forest. So it's called Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. But climate change is, and these are basically the Indian Forest Service, which recruits people to head these places, and then you have IS officers, the Indian Administrative Service officers heading those areas. Climate change is taking center stage in all our discussions, and that means that we must bring a special ministry of climate change, which actually should work and coordinate with all other ministries. It could be Ministry of Power, it could be Ministry of Forest, it could be even human women and child welfare. So the Ministry of Climate Change should actually be a coordinating body, which should be providing a framework how we look at the implementations, and then work with the different levels of institution that we have. That is what I think that will require a much more focused approach, because it's also about who is heading those institutions, right? Climate change is a very transdisciplinary subject. That means you need to bring in people who has those experiences, and then they should be heading those organizations, not the foresters, because they have very limited understandings, and also administrative officer. They have very superfine people. I've worked with some of the finest administrative officer, but they're not specialized people. We need to have specialized people, taking those center stages of climate change debates that we have in India.
Given the speed that changes are happening, not just in India, but also across the globe, do you think that the appetite to, for example, as you said, create a separate climate change, department or ministry, do you think that is, that is possible within a shorter time frame, or do you think that this process will take a longer time? As I'm just thinking from the context that things that are associated with governments tend to take a bit longer to pan out.
No, one good part of the 10 years of Modi government is it's been very quick in decision making. If the Prime Minister is convinced, they will take no time for him to execute things, right? which has been a good part because a lot of time it gets stuck in the files and approval process and other things. And I know that, proposing a separate ministry requires and very newer resources, a big chunk of money, and also people to hire. And that's why I'm saying that you need to have lateral entries. And this has been part of the governance process now recently, where a lot of people have been hired laterally, and they need to have those people because they bring special, what I would say, expertise, which lack in the governance system at this moment. And you also have, it's not only India is a huge country, and this means you have a central ministry, you must have its counterpart in the federal, systems, and that means that you need to convince the state governments and to have the similar kind of structure. And it's not going to be very easy, actually. And I understand where you're coming from, but somewhere it has to start. If you start thinking of it today, tomorrow it may precipitate. And that's the whole part of it. It takes 4-5 years for this structure to get roots into the system. But sooner the better will be, because we are seeing devastating impacts of climate change. And what is happening is that, not that the response is not there. We have this, extremely efficient disaster, post-disaster response team, which NDRF team, which actually goes everywhere to rescue. But we have much less team in terms of how do we prevent those disasters. And they also need to coordinate. They need to all come into one body in terms of its a response. And they're at this moment very fragmented institutional understanding of climate change, and that is where my worry is.
Now, you mentioned, for example, gender disparities earlier, and I think this is a good time to actually go into that too. Now, something that's recently, grabbed quite a lot of headlines is the disproportionate impact of climate change on, for example, women. Now, in many countries, and of course several regions in India, women are expected to undertake domestic activities, for example, like collecting water and collecting fuel for cooking, for example, which can expose them to different climate impacts that would be in when you talk about men, for example. So I'm wondering how you could talk, wondering if you can talk a bit on that, and if anything in this, for example, if this election has said anything on those matters, but also just generally has the political conversation been, has it focused on gender issues and climate issues at the same time?
So as part of my IPCC colleagues, with a huge number of people, about 25 researchers, we looked at the how gender sensitive the institutions are, especially when looking at sectors. And we looked at about 9 sectors across the globe, and we wanted to see what has been the impact of climate change on gender issues globally. And this has been a paper which has been published in Nature Humanities. And what we found is out of these 9 sectors, 4 sectors where we found that there's a negative climate impact on gender relations, right? So whatever the projects, the projects are there to combat climate change actually have negatively impacted gender relations. And this is a global data all across. We were looking at the global south and the places that we wanted to understand the relationship. Coming to India, and this is a mirror effect of what we have also found in India, that the climate change has been very detrimental to a section of people, especially women, and the intersectionalities that we have. When we say women, poor, men, disabled people with different sexualities, all across, we take them to group. And what we found that, my own field work, for example, we've seen that women are doing 3 shifts. Men have migrated from the hill areas in search of job, or in the, say, if you have a drought affected areas, or if you have flood affected areas, mostly the men who with the present prevalent gender conditions, the men migrate. They migrate and they stay in places in urban locations and work as daily wage laborers. They are also not in very good condition, but they have to migrate because they have to pay back the loan they have taken it. And this is a cycle of poverty which actually gets reinforced every time a drought or the flood occurs, right? So, and then women are at the forefront because of the gender relation. They take care of the economy and local, they elderly people, they take care of the children. And I've seen them, doing what we call 3 shifts. So they get up as early as 3:30 to 4 o'clock in the morning. They sleep at 12 o'clock in the night. And I have seen devastating impact in there on the lives and livelihood of people around. gender issues have been one of the issues at the forefront of economy, especially in climatic stressed areas that we have seen in India. So coming to these questions, what have we done about it? That's the whole part of it. What is the response from the government? So there hasn't been many studies, first of all, which is bringing these issues forefront. And there are very few gender researchers, people who are focusing on what is impacting. And this is a blanket statement to say that gender has impact on, or climate change impact on gender. But how, when, where, wow, all that is a very nuanced questions. And that means because the policymakers, and I work in a policy school where we teach, public policy to a large number of people coming from the services and from mid-career professionals. And this is where discussion is that when you create a policy, you need solid evidence and data, and that's where we're lacking. But in the blankets thing, I think what a couple of programs which has been there, for example, the recent government schemes that we have, which has been very pro women, and this is something which is laudable. The analysts say that some of these schemes which has been helping people, both women and men, and the lower strata of the society, are the one which is helping BJP win, because some of the welfare programs have been really, really successful, because this has eliminated all the what we call the middlemen. So earlier in the, if you would have asked me 20 years before, if you spend 1 rupee, it will, a fraction of that money will reach the poor. But with the direct benefit transfer, the new scheme that we have, and the Jan Dhan Yojana, which out of this we have this what we call the everyone has a bank account. The welfare schemes are directly reaching the poorer and the marginalized people. Some of these things have really been helpful and benefited the people who need them the most. What is needed is definitely a step further, and that is where I'm saying if we have a Ministry of Climate Change, we will be able to link that with the climate change issues as well. So at this moment, it's largely the social welfare program, which is protecting the bottom of the pyramid, bottom 30 to 40% of the people. But we also need to make, them strengthen in terms of their skills, capacities, so that they don't get dependent on the people, on the government resources, but they start working on their own. And that's where I think this the answer lies, the solution lies, I would say.
I think there's an interesting intersection there too when you talk about social development in general, and when people are given the opportunity to rise up in the economic ladder, so to speak, right? That they, generally speaking, naturally tend to become more resilient to for example, weather extremes. I mean, I think if you compare, just as another blanket statement, if you compare the fatality rate of a cyclone that hits the coastal part of India that's facing the Bay of Bengal, 50 years ago compared to now, you will notice a huge difference in the amount of fatalities, and that you can really put that down to just better construction, better resilience, and people who are better prepared. And I think that it's interesting that you mention that the welfare programs are really benefiting women in that sense, where they're able to probably come out a bit better. And I think there's an argument there to be suggested that development in general can also be part of adaptation. Would you say that would be something to say? Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree that the development would lead to a better resilient community. Also, what we have seen is that the infrastructure development, which is happening at a super fast pace, giving new opportunities for people. You have this internet revolution that has come. Internet is one of the cheapest resource that we have in all across the world. If you compare, Indian internets are one of the cheapest, and that means every household, you would have a connection to internet most of the time. You have the small vendors who have been involved in the larger what we call digital literacy program that we have. So if I go to market now, I don't carry wallet. I have my phone and I pay even 10 rupees, 20 rupees, small changes. I don't pay through cash. So the economy is turning into an internet-based formal economy, which is also helping the government, because every time the money transaction happens through the formal systems, it would definitely impact the government, because they will also be getting benefited by the circulation of the money that happens. Coming to and all these have actually impacted in terms of lifting large number of people out of poverty. If you look at the recent data, we have seen that the poverty percentage in India has declined. It's over 15% of people who are now below poverty line, which has been a huge success. About 400 million have been lifted out of poverty in less than 10 to 15 years, which is leapfrogging, which has not happened before in the time of history. And these are some of the good news, I would say. But what we need to also do is to link it up with the what we call going beyond what we have already, and that is the step forward. And that is where I'm very positive that things will change. And at this moment, things are so institutionalized that whichever government comes, be it be Modi government or Congress government, I don't think there's a looking back stuff. I think there's only going forward is what I would say.
What do you think would be the, in terms of, if we do look at going forward, what do you think would be the main challenges for whichever government comes to power, in terms of like things that we've been discussing, right? So for example, adaptation issues and I guess general reactive issues to say an extreme weather event. What do you think in your view would be challenging for the incoming government?
I think this, what I said earlier, the district level, sub-district level planning, and not really planning, but putting the money where the mouth is. Where huge money should come into district level, level where we can combat climate change. We have to have a program which the district or sub-district level programs, which means both hard and the soft side of climate change. That means you build infrastructure, you also build communities, strengthening communities and skills building. All that has to go together. That is what I see. It's a solution, but it is also challenging because with the population of 1.4 billion people, it's not very easy to implement and roll out any program, right? So that's something which is not easy for any of the things. And then we say about 40%, 50% of the population who are impacted by climate change, a direct impact by climate change. See, you and I will not be, if it rains outside, our salary would not stop, right? But if it rains very heavily outside, the people who have standing crops will be definitely, their 4 months of job is just washed away with one rain that we have seen. And this is what has been happening to a large number of people. We are giving a lot of insurance scheme has come out, the government has brought in a lot of program, but this is, short term is fine, but long term is not sustainable. And that's where we need to find ways and solution. The second thing which I say is talking to people. I think the entire part of it, stakeholders, involvement in planning process. That is where I think we need to do a very large scale exercise to understand what are the aspirations of people, how are they looking at it, because top down planning will not work. It has to be bottom up, and it has to also we have to bring in the climate projections, we have to bring in the scientific aspects of it, and trying to see what is the short term, medium term and long term impact we have, and how do we then combat it. And that is a very rigorous exercise that needs to be done, not only at state level, but also district and sub-district level, which is what I would suggest. And we can take up some sample in the beginning to see whether it is working or not, especially looking at the climatically critical zones like Himalayas, like coastal zones, and we can start working as a pilot basis. And once it is done, we are convinced we can scale it up.
Well, it makes sense too, because to work at, say, as you mentioned, like a sub-regional level, because India is it's a diverse landscape. As you mentioned earlier, it has everything from, mountainous areas to coastal regions. You've got, you've got areas that are, down in the coast that are also mountainous as well. And you have a very different degree of temperatures in extremes and lows and highs. So it makes sense to make the policy a bit more nuanced in terms of different regions as opposed to something that would cover the entire country in general.
Yeah, that's the thing. We have all the ecosystems of the world related in India. And that means one size fit all will not work. You have a broad policy framework which outlays the basic principles, but we have to root it in the local and the regional issues. And that's where the most challenging part also comes. It's not easy. It's very easy for me to say, but tomorrow if I'm given the chance, I'm sure it will be most difficult for me to implement. So, I do understand that there are challenges, but is there a second thing that we can do? What is the other alternative that we have? I see there's no other alternative than to go down to the last person and trying to predict her or his, kind of a place where the person gets mostly vulnerable to a certain climatic conditions, and that's where the focus should lie.
Yeah, no, and just being mindful of your time, Angela, I know we're coming up to our stop. I just had one final question for you. What would you like to see happen in the near-term future for India when we're talking about climate change impacts, and also how political parties view the challenges, but also how they respond to issues like what we've talked about, like gender issues, and also the impacts on subsistence farmers, for example? What would you like to see in the short term?
So India is growing very fast. We already, are the fifth largest economy in the world, and then the target for the new government, where it comes next 5 to 10 years, their target is to bring it to the third largest economy, and that means as the economy grows. See, in the West, what we had, where you come from. So you have this model where you grow, you pollute, and you try to fix the environment. We don't have that option. We are growing. At the same time, we cannot pollute because we already breached most of the climatic boundaries, and we cannot afford to pollute further. And that means a very limited carbon space for us to grow. And this also brings in opportunities. It is a condition where we are finding it difficult because the old models will not work for India. And, with all the hullabaloo which is happening on India, what we call globally, we are the third largest emitters of carbon and all the stuff which is happening, but our per capita carbon emission is one of the lowest in the world, almost equal to sub-Saharan Africa. That means we are still a very low carbon economy. And I would actually celebrate that, because I think that's the good part, that we must maintain our low carbon economy, must find a greener path to development. And we have all the resources and we have all the acumen. We in the past that we have done that. We have been, very environmentally conscious communities, which still not spoiled. Very few people have a lifestyle of the West, but most of the time people are very conscious of the environment footprint that we have. So I see that the ethos are already there. We have to just put that into a framework and apply it on ground, and that is where the challenge also lies. But I see, I'm a very positive person otherwise also. So I see that the things are going to be better for us, and we're also going to be much cleaner as a society. We will not have much of air pollution as much as we want, definitely. And also that we will grow with the environmentally benign framework in our mind. That is what I would suggest. Yeah, so you can find me on ISB website. If you type Anjal Prakash ISB, you'll find my credentials there. So that is there. Plus, I am on LinkedIn, same name, Anjal Prakash. I'm also on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Anjal Prakash, and I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. So all same name, and everywhere I'm there. I'm definitely active in some of the social platforms, and I'll definitely like to. My response time is 24 hours. I do respond back, and all the emails that comes to me or all the social media posts come to me, I try and respond to most of them, because I learn a lot from the comments that I receive. So I really look forward to this podcast, and I look forward to some of them hopping in my social media platform to tell me what did I say and what did I not say.
Awesome, Anjal. Well, I hope you don't get too stressed out with the 24-hour response times. But it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful speaking to you. And if you ever come to India, please do visit me in Hyderabad. I'll be very happy to host you.
If you found this episode of Attributions valuable, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast channel, follow us on social media, share it with your friends and with your network, and visit our website at www.climateimpactstracker.com for articles and more. Thanks again for listening. and I'll see you again on the next episode of Attributions.